On today's episode of Locked On Lightning, news broke earlier today that it looks like the Lightning will be without Andrei Vasilevskiy. How big of an impact will that have on this team in the first couple of 2 weeks of the season? We talk about all of that and more. But first, let's play that music.
You're Locked On Lightning, your daily podcast on the Tampa Bay Lightning. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome to another episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Tanker. I want to thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed in audio form, as well as on our YouTube page. On today's episode, obviously, the only storyline that we'll be talking about today is the news that broke earlier today that Andrei Vasilevskiy had surgery this morning on a hernia in his back, and the Lightning will be without him for the next 2 months of the season. And the nature of this surgery is, it's kind of came out of nowhere. I think we could all agree there was no indication that he was having any issues with his back, but it was reported today that he did get an injection because he was having some sort of pain or discomfort back in August. And it wasn't until really the Lightning's first practice in which he started feeling discomfort. And I guess it turned out to be more than what they really thought was going to be with him. So officially it's and I'm probably going to mispronounce this. It's a McDrustic. I am not even going to pronounce to say what kind of surgery it was, but it was to repair a lumbar disc herniation. Now, very curious. Can't say I've had one of those. So any of my listeners out there, I'm very curious as to, if you've had that injury before and you got surgery on it, hit up the show. Let me know. Or if you know someone that's had that, I'm very curious. How you heard it. The recovery time. Very curious as to just the recovery process and all of that. But Lightning will be without Vasilevskiy for about 2 months. So that is a really, really big blow for this team, especially after we have been emphasizing on this podcast all offseason how this offseason was going to be one of rejuvenation. It was going to be one of kind of dialing back in for the Tampa Bay Lightning to be able to get back on the right track after that early first round exit in the playoffs last year. And unfortunately now one of their big players, I feel like every year with this team, and I'm not blaming anybody, but I feel like every year with this team, it's always something to begin the season. It's just, we're without Cirelli to begin last year. Stamkos had his issues, obviously, a couple of years. Point 2 years, I believe it was 2-3 years ago, he had the double hip surgery. So Kucherov, I believe, was banged up here and there. So, and I guess it's only fitting now that Vasilevskiy is the one that goes down. But what really impact does this have on this team for the next 2 months? I mean, it's a huge impact. It's going to be the absence, I'm sure at times, is going to be immense. It's really going to be felt. I was very surprised when I heard the news, as I'm sure everybody else was. But when you look at, when you miss a player like a Point or a Kucherov or a Cirelli or a Stamkos, the list goes on of players that have gone down with injuries on this Tampa Bay Lightning team. It's one thing where if you lose a skater, well, at least we have some guys that could come up and kind of fill the void and kind of plug the flood, if you want to say that. for the time being, or at least help the team um, play to a certain level for the extended period of time. Well, you're a goaltender in the National Hockey League. I think it's just a totally different. It's a totally different, really blow to the team. I mean, as you could tell if you're listening on the audio side of things, or even watching on YouTube, I'm in utter disbelief right now about this. Um, I know obviously it's not career ending. It's but still 2 months in the NHL, especially in this division. It's a long time, especially with the struggles that we know that this team has had before. And really all we're gonna have to say and expect out of this Lightning team over the next couple of months is just hopefully that they keep their heads above water. Because I mean, we in years past when players are out for long periods of times, well, at least we've always said uh at least Vasilevskiy's there. He could kind of keep this team grounded and not let them falter too much. And now the guy that's really been the guy to help this team out when they've needed it most is out. It's worrisome because as we saw last year, and as I've detailed on this podcast multiple times, this team with all their struggles performance wise, who's really been the guy that's been able to keep them in games? And that's Vasilevskiy. Now that you don't have that guy, this team is going to have to play for the most part. I wouldn't say borderline perfect hockey, but I would say they need to go out there and not allow the demons of last year to haunt them. Because if that happens, I mean, when he comes back, and it could be a situation where if and I will say this, I'm not thinking that the Lightning are going to be completely at the bottom of the barrel in the division. Absolutely not. I think they're going to compete. I think they're going to have their games where, like I said, I think that we're going to see Vasilevskiy's absence very well felt. But this team is really going to have to do a stellar job of keeping their heads above water. Because if they don't, if they don't, if they play the way that we saw them play last year, and having said that, they were able to make the playoffs because they fell back on Vasilevskiy in situations when they weren't exactly playing their best hockey. Now that guy's gone, and I'm not saying that Jonas Johansson or Hugo Alnefelt's going to stink it up, but it's a totally different monster than what we're normally accustomed to. This team is going to have to play well enough to, if they're in the wild card spot when he gets back, I would consider that a win. I would consider that very uh, somewhat of a moral victory, I guess. Um, an ego push. I think this team, I still think they're very good to where on their best days they're probably top 10 in the league, but this team, like I said and have dictated multiple times on this show, is that they have their Jekyll and Hyde moments. And that's the big worry for me. And I think the big worry that should be for a lot of Lightning fans is that if we see Jekyll, if we see Hyde more times than Jekyll while Vasilevskiy's out, I mean, it's going to be a tall order for this team to really get back on track. Like I stated, actually, I think on yesterday's episode, with the team that we will see by Thanksgiving, and I'll glad to push it back to even Christmas, but the team that we'll see on the ice and the performance that we will get for the most part by then is really the team that we'll see for the rest of the year. Um, we might have to add a little bit of an asterisk on that because of Vasilevskiy's absence. But yeah, this is a big major blow to this team, especially after a lot of the enthusiasm that was surrounding this team heading into the new NHL season. So let me know in the comments below what you think. What are your thoughts on this? And like I said, if you've had some sort of injury like this, gotten the surgery and all of that, especially if you've played sports or played hockey or whatever, let me know, what was the recovery like? I'm very curious. I honestly don't know anybody that's had this kind of injury, uh, and just to get a gauge on what to expect from Vasilevskiy going forward. Obviously, anytime a goaltender hurts his back, that's going to be a huge deal and have a huge effect on his performance. So we're going to continue talking about that. What does this mean for the Lightning? We're going to talk about the goalie replacements. I just spoke about, briefly mentioned Jonas Johansson and Hugo Alnefelt. Those guys will be thrusted into big roles in the upcoming season for the next 2 months. So we will talk about those guys as well. But first, I want to talk about our sponsors today, and that is our friends over at DoorDash. Now, are you missing the syrup for your pancakes? You know, whenever I get up in the morning, I want to make a big breakfast. I want to be able to, have a complete meal to start the day. And I always hate not being able to have all those ingredients. Well, this morning I actually was missing the syrup for the pancakes, and I ran out of my favorite coffee as well. So just day was ruined, and that was before the Vasilevskiy thing. But I love the convenience of getting what I want right to my door with DoorDash. With DoorDash grocery delivery, you could stock up for the week or order last minute cravings conveniently. I've trusted DoorDash to deliver my restaurant favorites, and now you can too, to get grocery delivery that actually delivers. So get 50% off your first DoorDash order up to $20 value when you use the code LOCKED at checkout. Limited time offer, terms apply. That's 50% off at up to $20, no minimal subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter the code LOCKED. Don't forget, that's code LOCKED for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. So, as always, I want to thank you all once again for making us your first listen of the day. And if you haven't already done so, please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed. We are available in audio form. So that's all Sirius XM, uh, we iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. There's I think Stitcher as well. We're available wherever. So if you have a streaming app that streams podcasts, we are most likely on it. And of course, we are also available on YouTube. So subscribe to the channel as well on there. Drop a comment below. What are your thoughts about this whole Vasilevskiy 2 months really without Vasilevskiy? Like I said, and it's one of those things where it's going to be tough for, I think, Lightning fans to kind of adjust. It's going to be a little bit of a brief adjustment period because, and my former Locked On NHL host, Chris Matilli from Locked On Avs, always teases me that because I am a defiantly uh, one goalie system kind of guy, where around the NHL you see more of a two goalie system with some teams, and he always makes fun of me saying, "Well, it's easier to be a one goalie system guy when you have one of the best goaltenders on the planet, really." And now we're going to be without him for 2 months, and it's going to be a good. I think the positive we could take out of this situation is really that we're going to see what this team's made of. We're going to see adversity out of the gate, and I think that when teams face adversity, especially this Lightning team, for the most part, they're able to adapt very well. Um, Now I know there's going to be situations where I think that they're just going to completely crap the bed, and we're just going to have to pencil that one off or file that one away for another day. But if there's any example we could look at, um, with this Lightning team when they're not playing with Andrei Vasilevskiy, I think the best examples could be when they've had Elliott out there last year, McElhinney a couple of years ago as well. The Lightning have played for the most part very well. Even if they didn't win some of those games, when they've had their backups on the ice, I thought that they played a better brand of hockey. And I mean that they're they're not as relaxed, I would say. I think they're more kind of in your face. I feel like they're more aggressive. I feel like there's a little bit more need for them to get things going early on because they don't have that great goalie and net behind them. Um, and I think that's what we're going to see out of this team for the at least the next 2 months. And I would hope that they would be able to play like that for the duration of the season. But that's the kind of hockey that we need to see out of them as well. Kind of that, aggressive type, kind of just taking control of the game off the opening puck drop. And I think that, like I said, especially with these guys in net with Jonas Johansson and Hugo Alnefelt, I think they're really going to do that. I think they're really going to need to do that. So let's just talk about Johansson and Alnefelt. So Johansson was signed this offseason. He was over at Colorado last year. He's kind of really bounced around the league for pretty much his entire career. He was in Buffalo. He was in Colorado. Then he went to Florida, and then he went back to Colorado afterwards. And he has a career record of 11-13, but that's also with 35 games played. His goals against average is 3.35. Save percentage is 886. And that's obviously because he's been a backup really for the most part where he's gone. And I'm not going to take much stock in those numbers. I think that whatever's been done in past years, what's done is done. Let's focus about the Johansson we're going to get this season, especially now that he's going to be thrusted into the spotlight a little bit faster than I think we've all would have appreciated. So I mean, he's also a big goaltender. We love our big goaltenders in the NHL. He's 6'5", 220. Haven't been able to see a whole bunch of Johansson, but we'll definitely see him on opening night. So that'll be interesting to see how he handles, because I'm sure the opposing teams that we will see over the next couple of months will definitely try to go at him as much as they can to make him uncomfortable, and he'll have to definitely handle that adversity in stride. So looking at his battery mate, that's going to be Hugo Alnefelt. Some of you might know Hugo Alnefelt. He was the 71st overall pick by the Lightning in the 2019 draft. He's out of Sweden, 22-year-old. Has been up in Syracuse for the last couple of years, played one game in 2021-22 at the NHL level. That was a blowout game, so I'm not even going to look at that and take anything for what it's worth. But last season in Syracuse, he played 33 games, had a save percentage of .904, goals against average 2.77. So I'll take it. I like it. I like the record. The record was 17, 12, and 2. And that's very encouraging. From what I've heard from NFL, it seems as though like they were going to bring him up at some point to be Vasilevskiy's backup. He's top goalie prospect in the organization. So, you definitely, I mean, I haven't heard anything just yet about whether or not he's going to be at the other goaltender in this battery, but I would imagine that's what the plan is going to be. If that's not the case, I'm curious if the Lightning are going to bring a goaltender from maybe free agency or whatever the case may be. I don't think that's what's going to happen, just because Lightning are already up against the cap. And I don't think you're going to want to go out and spend even more money on a goaltender that is only going to really be usable for the next 2 months. And you already spent money on a goaltender this offseason by signing Johansson. So it's going to be interesting, really, how those two are going to gel to each other. Very curious to see how Cooper, kind of tasked with having to go to a two-goalie system, kind of see how those two guys who he favors more. Let me know in the comments below who do you think should get more of the starts. I think that we're probably going to see maybe every 2 games we're going to get a different goaltender every 2 games, which I mean, I don't know. I I think you really, in my opinion, I think we should go with the hot hand. I don't think that really in the long run they should have a 2 goalie system. Um, that's just me. If a guy's playing good and he's played very well in 3 games, why are you going to sit him? Especially when he's really not going to be playing for the rest of the season when Vasilevskiy's back in 2 months afterwards. So, yeah, let me know in the comments what you think. I mean, it's a not a good situation. I think it's a sucky situation for this Lightning team. Like I said, a lot of enthusiasm coming into the season, and now kind of just a little bit of a gut punch to start the season with your top goaltender out for 8 to 10 weeks. So wrapping things up on the show, as always, like I said, subscribe to the pod, give us a follow wherever podcasts are distributed. We will be continuing our player preview for the NHL season as the season grows ever nearer. And yeah, like I said, a little bit of a gut punch with this Vasilevskiy news, but what are you going to do? You just got to roll with the punches. The Lightning are no strangers to playing without some of their bigger players, their bigger star players. And they're just going to have to go about their business like they normally do. So, yeah, follow us on our social media accounts at LO_Lightning on Twitter, as well as LockedOn_Lightning on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter at DankyDank, DENKYDANK. And we'll be back tomorrow to actually do our player preview on Andrei Vasilevskiy. So you definitely don't want to miss that. So in the meantime, that's been it for this episode of Locked On Lightning, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Danker. I'll talk to you in the next one.